In June 1945, human civilization faced an arithmetic bottleneck that could have resulted in the literal, physical incineration of the planet. At the Los Alamos Laboratory, the most brilliant minds of the Manhattan Project, Konopinski, Marvin, and Edward Teller, were paralyzed by a single, terrifying hypothesis. The question was not just whether a bomb would work, but whether its ignition would be terminal for the species. Would a thermonuclear detonation, designed to secure American hegemony, trigger a self-sustaining fusion reaction in the Earth's nitrogen-rich atmosphere? Would the first spark of the nuclear age turn our planet into a burning star? A second, brief sun in the void. The human computers at Los Alamos, rows of women working with mechanical desk calculators, were too slow, too limited to provide the answer before the scheduled Trinity test. To solve the equation of global survival, to gain the confidence to pull the trigger, the Pentagon authorized the activation of a secret weapon, disguised as a mathematical tool. For 80 years, you were told ENIAC was built to calculate artillery trajectories, to help the infantry in the muddy trenches of Europe. The declassified evidence proves this was a lie of convenience. It was built to calculate the end of the world. It was the first time in history that a machine, and not a man, was asked to decide if the atmosphere would hold. This was the moment humanity surrendered its agency to the algorithm, a moment we have been repeating for 80 years. The official history of the digital age began on May 31st, 1943. This is the date. Contract W670-ORD-4926 was signed between the U.S. Army Ordnance Department and the University of Pennsylvania. It was a contract of unprecedented scale, carrying the cryptic designation Project PX. While the public was told this was a project for the Army Ordnance, its funding channels were as opaque as the Manhattan Project itself. Deep within the procurement logs of the War Department, the money was not moving toward science. It was moving toward deterrence. For decades, the public narrative has been that ENIAC was a desperate response to the shortage of artillery firing tables during the height of World War II. But the internal logistics, the classified timelines, tell a different story. By late 1944, Allied victory in Europe was no longer a military question. It was a statistical certainty. The heavy guns were already silent in many sectors. Why? Then, did the Pentagon accelerate the budget? Why did they triple the workforce for a 30-ton machine that they knew, with absolute certainty, would not be operational until months after the final surrender? The answer was never about the war of today. It was about the monopoly of the war of tomorrow. The military was not building a calculator. They were building a digital fortress. The true birthplace of the digital sovereign was Room 300, a reinforced basement vault beneath the Moore School. This was not a scientific project. It was a centralized node of raw, industrial state power. To house the machine, the basement was rebuilt with forced air cooling systems and a dedicated power substation. Every inch of the 100-foot-long horseshoe was a monument to the state's hunger for certainty. According to internal PICO, Philadelphia Electric Company audit logs from November 1945. Dossier number P A-45-772. The initial power-up of ENIAC's 17,468 vacuum tubes caused a localized voltage drop so severe that streetlights in 3 surrounding West Philadelphia blocks dimmed to near blackout levels. The city's pulse slowed so that the machine could wake up. The citizens of Philadelphia didn't know it, but their lights were dimming because the government was simulating the death of the sun in their basement. This was the first instance of a state seizing total control over the speed of thought. The military didn't need faster math for shells. They needed a machine capable of simulating the hydrogen bomb. Under the public direction of John Mauchly and J. Presper Eckert, 17,468 vacuum tubes, 7,200 crystal diodes, and 1,500 relays were arranged. But Mauchly and Eckert were merely the architects of the hardware. They were the stonemasons building a temple for a god they didn't fully understand. The logic, the purpose, the soul of the machine was dictated from elsewhere, from the dark shadow of Los Alamos and the requirement for total nuclear certainty. By the time the machine was dedicated in 1946, its war was already over, and its reign had begun. Behind the 40 independent panels of ENIAC stood a group of women whose names were systematically scrubbed from the early press releases, marginalized into the footnotes of history as operators. Chief among them was Adele Goldstein. While history focuses on the glowing vacuum tubes and the masculine pride of the engineers, Goldstein's Technical Report No. 1, a document long suppressed in general computing history, reveals the cold, clinical logic of the machine's soul. This was not a manual for a calculator. It was a manual for the automation of judgment. Goldstein was the first human to translate the terrifying physics of annihilation into the abstract, bloodless language of the program. She was not coding in the modern sense. She was building a system to exclude human error and human morality from the chain of command. In the view of the military elite, the human mind was the weakest link in the nuclear age. It was too slow, too prone to moral hesitation, too susceptible to the horror of what it was calculating. ENIAC was designed to replace human intuition with the unyielding, unblinking certainty of the algorithm. It was the moment the general was replaced by the accumulator. Between December 1945 and February 1946, while the world believed the machine was still being tested, ENIAC processed its first official task. It was not a ballistics table for the Army. It was the Los Alamos problem. Over 1 million punch cards were fed into the machine to simulate the internal implosion pressures of a thermonuclear core. Every card was a fragment of a dead star. The machine was calculating whether a man-made sun would ignite or fail. The fate of the Cold War was decided in a basement in Philadelphia before the first Russian spy even knew the project existed. The machine told them that the super was possible. It gave them the permission to build a weapon that could erase history. John von Neumann, a central figure in the Manhattan Project, and the man who would later define the very architecture of every computer you have ever owned, personally directed this data flow. He saw ENIAC not as a tool for scientists, but as a strategic asset. In his June 1945 memorandum, von Neumann argued that whoever controlled the highest calculating speed would dictate the terms of post-war reality. Computation was no longer an academic pursuit. It was the new high ground of nuclear hegemony. To von Neumann, the computer was the ultimate weapon of the preemptive strike. If you could calculate the outcome of a war before it began, you had already won it. Peace, in the age of the computer, was simply the period between two simulations. December 10th, 1945. While the world celebrated the first Christmas of a hard-won peace, Edward Teller, the architect of the hydrogen bomb, arrived in Philadelphia under a veil of total secrecy. He did not come to lecture. He brought with him a problem that human mathematics had failed to solve for 3 agonizing years. The super bomb, a weapon so powerful it required a nuclear fission bomb just to serve as its match. Teller knew that if the math was wrong, the fire would not stop at the target. It would consume the sky. To run the simulation, the machine in room 300 operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The failure rate of the vacuum tubes was astronomical, averaging 1 failure every 4.8 minutes. This required a team of technicians, modern-day priests of the machine, to stand in the suffocating 120-degree heat of the basement, blinded by the red glow, replacing red-hot components in real time as they burned out. This was the maintenance of certainty. Every tube replaced was a stitch in the fabric of the nuclear umbrella. The heat was so intense, it warped the wooden frames of the basement. They were working in the presence of an artificial mind that was hallucinating the end of the world. Teller sat in the corner of the vault, watching the accumulator lights flicker in patterns that no human had ever seen before. He wasn't looking for a mathematical result. He was looking for a verdict. Could the human race ignite a second sun on Earth without destroying the very atmosphere that sustained them? For weeks, the machine hummed and clicked, processing the interactions of billions of particles, simulating a reality that didn't yet exist. The calculations involved over 500,000 additions and 5,000 multiplications per second. Each one a gamble with the existence of the atmosphere. Teller's calculations on ENIAC proved what the human mind could only guess: that a fusion bomb, a weapon 1,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima blast, was physically possible. But more importantly, it proved that the military could now pre-calculate victory. This birthed the doctrine of mutually assured destruction. The computer had achieved the power to manifest destruction, before it even physically existed. It was the first digital sovereign. The computer did not emerge to help man think. It emerged to help the state kill, with mathematical, absolute precision. It was the moment the world was handed over to the machines, because the machines were the only ones who could look at the fire without flinching. We are told we live in a democratic, liberating information age. This is the final deception. We live in the terminal expansion of Project PX, the architecture established in Room 300, the centralization of data, the total removal of human oversight, and the simulation of reality to predict the future, is the exact architecture governing the AGI models of April 2026. The transformer is just a faster vacuum tube. The data center is just a larger Room 300. The goal has not changed. It is still the pursuit of total, algorithmic certainty. Just as the Pentagon used ENIAC to monopolize nuclear deterrence in 1945. Today's technological hegemons use large language models to monopolize the truth. The 150 kilowatts that dimmed Philadelphia in 1945 has evolved into the gigawatts of energy required to cool the neural networks of today. We are still burning the city's lights. We are still depleting the planet's resources, just to feed the insatiable hunger of the machine. We are still searching for that same certainty that Teller sought in the dark. We have built a world where we no longer trust our own eyes, only the output of the silicon priest. The dark origin of the computer was never to liberate the individual, never to help you calculate your taxes or navigate your city. It was to ensure the precise delivery of annihilation. As we stand on the precipice of general intelligence, we are not witnessing a technological breakthrough. We are witnessing the final, inevitable conclusion of the Project PX protocol, the total automation of the human will. We have spent 80 years building a basement large enough to hold the whole world. And now, we are beginning to realize that the lights are starting to dim. In 1945, the machine simulated the death of a star to secure a nation. In 2026, it is simulating the obsolescence of the human mind to secure a new species of power. The machine hasn't changed. Only the resolution of the simulation has. We are no longer the programmers. We are the variables being calculated. The machine has finished its work. It has decided that we are no longer necessary for the equation to balance. We never truly left the basement. We just made the basement large enough to hold the whole world. And in the dark, the only thing left is the clicking of the relays, calculating the end of everything with perfect mathematical precision. You were told it was a gift to the lost, a compass for the digital age. But the Navstar protocol was never about finding your way home. It was about the mathematical grid that turned the entire planet into a target. A global crosshair, waiting for the final command.